everyone, welcome back to My Parenting Way. My name's Katie and today I'm going to give you a bit of an update on all the medical ailments that Aidan has had over his brief little life, and I have mentioned in my previous videos, which I will list below if you want to go back and have a view of those, but I just thought I'd give you an update because I've mentioned these things in my videos and I also mentioned them at the time what we were trying to do to resolve it. But I realised that sometimes it's nice to know the outcome of what we were doing, hence this video. So I apologise in advance if I start playing with this thing. It's new and I'm sort of trying to get used to it, but it's already annoying me. So Aidan is now 18 months old and a lot of these things have progressed over time or resolved themselves. So I just thought I'd go right back to the beginning and start mentioning about his laryngeal problems, problems with his larynx as a result of the cord being tied around his neck at birth. If you want to go back and listen to or watch my birth story, it will explain it all a bit more in detail then. But I just thought I'd give you an update on that. So just as a bit of a recap, we were having issues with the fact that he wasn't being able to feed properly. So when he gulped milk when I was breastfeeding him and he swallowed, what he would do is he would have to take on loads of air when he was trying to drink, because his throat there was something to do with the flap in his throat that wasn't quite working properly. So I spoke to a breastfeeding specialist who was able to diagnose him straight away his problems, because I was really struggling to breastfeed, and also we were finding what he had was this kind of raspy, squeaky breathing. And actually I didn't even have to see the breastfeeding specialist. She could literally hear him as I was feeding him down the phone, and she asked the question, did he have any issues when he was born with the actual birth? And I said, well, no, not really, he just had the cord around his neck. And she was like, yep, that's exactly what it is. So because of this, he had some damage and it made breastfeeding really hard. And I spoke to the breastfeeding consultant who advised that we had to position Aidan really carefully and make sure that his head was in the perfect position when breastfeeding. So we had to make sure that his chin was tucked under into the breast and that he had this kind of cupped situation to allow the milk to enter down into him to swallow better and more efficiently, rather than this scenario because he had so much damage there. So that was fine. We tried our hardest to make sure the positioning was good, which was fine, but he was quite a big baby and he put on weight very quickly. So just being able to hold him, and he was a heavy boy, he was long. So trying to breastfeed him in the correct position was really difficult, but we managed. The other thing that we did at the time is we took him to a cranial osteopath that specialised in babies. And what they basically do is they hold the baby and they put their hands underneath their neck, right at the back, and they just do really tiny, gentle movements. And honestly, you would never know they were doing anything because, I think they were just doing very tiny little tweaks. But basically after each session, we only went for 2 sessions, one because it was very expensive, and 2, we were struggling to find time to add this sort of to our week, and thirdly, he was gradually getting better by himself anyway. So we only went for 2 sessions. The first session he slept pretty much for the whole day after, but the day after, sort of 24 hours after the first session, he was horrible. He hated life, and he was really narky and he just cried loads. But the second session was much easier. He didn't sleep for as long afterwards, but he was also less cranky. And we noticed after each time there was a slight change in the way he was able to to latch, which really helped. So I do encourage anyone who's gone through the same thing to speak to a cranial osteopath and maybe even go for an initial session, just to see how you get on, just ask the questions, be armed with loads of questions on how you could help. And quite often, if any cranial osteopath in the area, they usually know or have heard of the specific breastfeeding consultants that you might end up speaking to about breastfeeding and latching and things like that. So obviously they all know each other, and they all sort of try and help the patients the best they can. So be armed with questions, go see how it works for you, even if it's for a one-off session, but it really worked for us. So yeah, check that out. So as I said, we only went to them for 2 sessions. I find it did help. I wouldn't say it resolved it. It certainly didn't resolve it quickly, but Aidan ended up almost growing out of it as his muscles developed and as his head control got better. So we found that by sort of 3-4 months, when he was starting to lift his head, you know, through tummy time and general strength, it got much better. And this is when it all resolved itself, and we haven't had any issues with it since. No feeding issues, no issues with his posture or movement. It's absolutely fine. So if you're going through the same thing, take solace in knowing that they do grow out of it, and it is not an ongoing problem. So the second thing was his blocked tear ducts. Now, if you haven't seen my blocked tear duct video, please check it out and have a little look at that, because in that video I mentioned how it came about, how we noticed it, and also at the end of that video I mentioned about a bit of massage that we did for Aidan to try and help him. So we noticed, I can't remember how old he was, I think he was around 11 weeks old, 12 weeks old, and we noticed that he had almost like a little rash around both his eyes, which extended from the corner of his eye and all the way down, and it almost came up around the sort of inside of the eyelid as well. We spoke to a GP who I took photos and sent it in because it was all COVID times. Obviously seeing GPs were almost impossible to do. And she rang back and advised that it was a blocked tear duct and not to worry about it too much, and just to keep an eye on it, and just some breast milk in the eye sometimes would help, just in case it was an infection. But she didn't think it was an infection, and it didn't come across as an infection. It wasn't gunky, it didn't affect the actual eyeball, there wasn't a bloodshot eye, it wasn't swollen or anything like that, and he didn't really seem bothered about it. It was just the rash, and it was all coming from the inside of the eyelid, right where the tear duct was. So I would massage it every time it flared up, which was every couple of weeks, and it would be ongoing for about 2 months. So after 2 months, it disappeared by itself. And again, touch wood, it hasn't come back. We've had no issues with his eyes. It was just at that time, and just a bit of simple massage and just to check on it, make sure it was okay, and it just went by itself. The next thing was Aidan's sesame seed allergy or intolerance. It's not a true allergy because he doesn't have that severe allergic reaction that comes out of severe, things like peanuts and that kind of allergy. It's more of an intolerance, so he gets sort of very minor reactions, so it gives him a really bad tummy, really loose poos, and one day we discovered that by giving him hummus, it all flared up around, this was obviously when we were weaning him, it all flared up around his mouth, so we got this really sort of, almost, it looked like it was about to blister, this really aggressive rash around his mouth, where literally the line where the hummus was touching his mouth, no further than that. So it was almost like direct contact was creating this sort of little minor allergy reaction. But always about 24 to 48 hours after he would have anything with sesame in, he would have really gassy, painful tummy, and he would have these big explosive poos, which it took a while for him to get over. It would always last for about 3 or 4 days. So we've really had to try and be really ruthless with trying to cut out anything with sesame in. And one of the main culprits we found was little rice cakes. So either sort of main big rice cakes that you get, that you sort of spread stuff on, or even baby ones. If you look on the packaging, it can say sesame is within that. So we've had to cut all those out, which is a shame because rice cakes are so easy to give to toddlers to snack on. But since we've cut it all out, it seems to have gotten a lot better. No more flare-ups, no more rashes around the face. The poos have gotten a lot better. We do find, however, that there can be a relapse if he's been in contact, and sometimes we don't even know what it is, unfortunately. But it could be, we wonder whether he's been given a snack, either by Emily, who still eats rice cakes, and that she's either given him a bit, or he's come across it at nursery or something like that. We have informed nursery, but you know, kids, you know, they can pick up stuff and shove it in their mouth really, really quickly when they're at that age. So we never quite know what's going on. So with Aidan now, as a bit of an update, at 18 months, we tested him a few weeks ago. So we gave him a little bit of hummus on a spoon and then monitored his reaction. Unfortunately, he then got a bit of a flare up on his cheek, and he got a bit of a swelling red cheek, which was then, it sort of tracked up his face. And then sure enough, about 24 hours after, he had really horrible gassy tummy and really big explosive poos. So we're still avoiding the Sesame, and we're not going to take it any further in regards to allergy testing or anything like that. I think we pretty much know what it is, and I think as long as we avoid it and just monitor it, basically, that's all we can do for now. So I mentioned in a few of my videos as well that Aidan suffers with quite bad eczema, and it was all over his body at one point. It was on his legs, it was on his tummy. He would get like really horrendous patches on his tummy, and on his arms as well. I'm happy to say it's cleared up on almost everywhere apart from his forearms. So on his tummy is fine, on his legs is fine, on his back is fine. It is literally on his forearms. And I wonder whether it's a combination of the fact that if he's playing with water or anything like that, or any paint or anything like that, what you automatically do is roll up their sleeves. So their forearms are exposed to things like paint and food and like water and basically things that could probably irritate the skin. So that's the only place that we're dealing with it at the moment. So how we're dealing with that is we're just simply creaming the area with some sort of nice emollient, such as like Dipper Base or whatever we've got that's like quite nice and child friendly. And it seems to be keeping on top of it. It's never truly gone. We find it improves and get worse and improves and get worse. It tends to flare up if he is stressed. So if he's in a stressful situation, such as when we went to France a few months ago, he really didn't like the flight. He cried a lot during the flight, and we noticed that when we got to the other side, his eczema had flared up quite badly. Also we had to be really careful with our baby bath. So the stuff that we obviously put in the water for him to splash around in the bath and create bubble bath. We noticed that if we put the wrong stuff in, even if it was child friendly, it could really flare up quite badly. So we've had to be really careful of the stuff, and occasionally we then use oilatum, which obviously is quite an emollient based like bubble bath that you put in the bath, and it helps improve the moisture in the skin. So if it gets really bad, we'll put the oilatum in, and that helps improve the skin slightly. But otherwise we're just keeping on top of it with emollients, and obviously monitoring his food, making sure he doesn't have any sesame things, and yeah, he doesn't seem too bothered about it, and it is improving. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, it should go with age. So there you go. I hope you found that useful as a little update with all Aidan's medical issues that he's had in his little short life. If you have any questions about what I have talked about today, please feel free to either message me directly or leave it in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you, and also sometimes as a little update, if you're a mum that's going through it, it's nice to hear from a mum who's gone out the other side and learn that it's all fine and it's all okay, and babies survive all these little things. So if you want to leave a comment, please feel free, and I'm more than happy to get back to you. But otherwise, please like, please subscribe, and I will see you next time.